Hey buddy, having fun?
Yeah, it's the best.
Let's get you a better view.
Cristiano Ronaldo stopped the game. Not because of an injury, not because of a foul. He stopped it because of something nobody in that stadium could have ever predicted. 90,000 people went completely silent. And when they finally understood what he was doing, grown men started crying in the stands. The stadium was packed, every single seat taken. The kind of atmosphere that makes the hair on the back of your neck stand straight up the moment you walk through the tunnel. It was a Wednesday night in late November, and the air inside the stadium carried that particular electric charge that only the biggest games in the world can produce. Flags waving, scarves raised, thousands of voices blending into one enormous sound that seemed to shake the very foundations of the building. On the pitch, the match had been grinding forward for 67 minutes. The score was 1-0. A tight, physical, almost exhausting game where every inch of space had to be earned with sweat and discipline. Both teams were locked in that dangerous mid-game tension where one mistake, one moment of lost concentration could decide everything. And then Cristiano Ronaldo received the ball just inside the opposing half. He had done it 1,000 times before. The touch, the turn, the first step of acceleration. His body moving the way it had been moving since he was a skinny kid on the streets of Funchal, Madeira, are dreaming of moments exactly like this one. For a fraction of a second, the entire stadium leaned forward, because when Cristiano Ronaldo gets the ball with space in front of him and fire in his eyes, you do not look away. You simply do not look away. But then something happened that nobody in that stadium had ever seen before. He stopped, not because a defender caught him, not because a muscle tightened or a joint gave way. He simply stopped running. He let the ball roll a few yards ahead of him and turned his head toward the stands along the east side of the stadium. He stood perfectly still in the middle of the pitch while 90,000 people tried to figure out what they were witnessing. The referee raised his arms. His teammates called his name. The opposing players paused, uncertain whether to attack the loose ball or wait for some explanation that nobody seemed able to give. Cristiano Ronaldo was not looking at the ball anymore. He was looking at a boy in a wheelchair in row 7 of the East Stand. To understand what happened in that moment, you have to go back exactly 4 days. It was a Saturday afternoon, the kind of quiet Saturday that professional footballers rarely get to experience. No training scheduled, no press obligations. Just an empty afternoon that Cristiano had decided to fill the way he sometimes did when the season allowed it, by visiting a children's hospital 2 miles from the training ground. These visits were not announced. There were no cameras, no social media posts planned, no public relations strategy behind them. The hospital staff knew he was coming because he had been coming for years, always calling ahead, always asking the same question. Which kids are having the hardest week? Not the ones whose families had written letters, not the ones whose stories had already reached the press. The ones having the hardest week. That Saturday, a nurse named Patricia led him down a corridor on the 4th floor and stopped outside a room with a small drawing of a football taped to the door. Someone had drawn it in crayon, a wobbly circle with black hexagons, the way children draw footballs when they have never held a proper one in their hands. The boy inside the room was 11 years old. His name was Gabriel, Gabriel had been admitted to the hospital 6 weeks earlier after a car accident that had left him with a severe spinal injury. The doctors were honest with his mother, a woman named Diane, who had driven 4 hours to be there and had not left the building since the night of the accident. The injury was serious. The road ahead would be long. There were things that might never come back the way they were before. What Diane did not tell the doctors, because it felt too small compared to everything else, was that Gabriel had been on his way to his very first football match the night of the accident. She had saved for 8 months to buy those tickets. 2 seats in the upper tier. She had wrapped them in tissue paper and put them in a small box with a bow. Because Gabriel's birthday was 3 days away, and she wanted it to be a surprise. He had never seen a professional game in person. He had only ever watched through a screen. I curled up on the living room couch with his knees pulled to his chest, wearing a jersey that was 2 sizes too big because it was the only one she could afford. That jersey was folded on the chair beside his hospital bed when Cristiano Ronaldo walked into the room. Gabriel was awake but quiet. He had been quiet for most of the 6 weeks. The nurses had noticed it. Diane had noticed it. Before the accident, Gabriel was the kind of kid who talked constantly, who asked questions about everything, and who laughed loudly at his own jokes even when nobody else found them funny. That version of Gabriel had gone somewhere after the accident, and nobody was quite sure how to bring him back. When the door opened and Cristiano Ronaldo stepped into the room, Gabriel did not react the way most 11-year-olds would. He did not gasp. He did not grab his mother's arm. He just looked, with those quiet eyes that had replaced his old ones, and said nothing for a long moment. Then he said, very softly, "You are real." Cristiano sat down beside the bed, not across the room, not in the chair by the door the way visitors sometimes do when they are not sure how close to get. He pulled a chair right up to the edge of the mattress and sat down like he was settling in for a conversation that was going to take as long as it needed to take. He asked Gabriel about football, not in a celebrity way, not in the way that famous people sometimes ask questions just to seem interested. He asked him which position he played. He asked him which player he tried to copy when he was alone in the backyard. He asked him what it felt like the first time he scored a goal, that exact feeling, right in the chest, right in that 1 second when the ball crosses the line and the world suddenly becomes a different place than it was a moment before. Gabriel started talking, slowly at first, short sentences, but then longer ones, and then stories. He told Cristiano about the Sunday league team he played for, the muddy pitch at the edge of town, the coach who wore the same red jacket every single week, regardless of the weather. He told him about the goal he scored 3 weeks before the accident, a left-footed shot from the edge of the penalty area that caught the inside of the post and rolled in, and how he had run to the corner flag and done Cristiano's signature celebration, the one with the jump and the turn, so the one that every kid in the world had practiced in front of a mirror at least once. Cristiano laughed when he heard that. A real laugh, not a polite one. He stayed for 2 hours. When he finally stood up to leave, he shook Gabriel's hand like he was shaking the hand of an equal. Then he reached into the bag he had brought with him and pulled out a jersey. Not a replica, not the kind you buy in a store. A match-worn jersey with his name and his number on the back, are the kind that only exists in limited quantities in the entire world, the kind that serious collectors spend thousands of dollars trying to acquire. He had signed it across the front in black marker, but he had not signed it with just his name. He had written a full sentence. The sentence said, "To Gabriel, the bravest person in this stadium." Gabriel held the jersey with both hands and looked at it for a long time without speaking. Then he looked up at Cristiano and asked a question that nobody in the room was prepared for. He asked, "Do you think I will ever play again?" The room went very still. Diane turned toward the window. Patricia, the nurse, looked down at her shoes. The honest medical answer to that question was complicated and uncertain, the kind of answer that doctors give carefully and in stages, with qualifications and timelines and cautious language designed to protect everyone from false hope. Cristiano did not give a complicated answer. He looked at Gabriel straight in the eyes and said, "I think you are going to do things that will surprise every single person in this room, including yourself, including me." He paused for just a moment, then added, "And when you do, I want to hear about it." He left his personal phone number with Diane on a piece of paper from the hospital notepad on the bedside table. He told her to call him, not the club, not a representative, not an assistant, him, whenever Gabriel wanted to talk. 3 days passed. On the Tuesday before the Wednesday night match, Cristiano was in a team meeting reviewing the opposing side's defensive shape when his phone buzzed. He glanced at it once, then looked again. It was a number he had given out only a handful of times in his entire career. It was Diane. She was not calling with bad news. She was calling because Gabriel had asked her to. Gabriel wanted Cristiano to know that he had sat up in bed that morning without help for the first time since the accident. Just sat up. A small thing, medically speaking. One step in a very long process. But Gabriel had asked his mother to call because he remembered what Cristiano had said about surprising people, and he wanted someone to know that it had started. Cristiano stepped out of the team meeting. He talked to Gabriel for 22 minutes. At the end of the call, he asked Diane one more question. He asked if Gabriel could come to the match the next night. She explained the situation. The wheelchair, the medical equipment, the logistics, the cost of travel, the uncertainty of whether Gabriel was strong enough for the noise and the crowd and the emotion of it all. Cristiano told her not to worry about any of that. He told her someone from the club would call her within the hour to arrange everything. The club's medical team assessed Gabriel that same evening via a video call. They determined that with the right precautions, a specially adapted viewing position, medical staff on standby, limited exposure to the most intense crowd noise, the trip was possible. Transportation was arranged. A space was prepared in row 7 of the East Stand, close enough to the pitch that Gabriel would be able to see the players' faces. Diane spent that night trying to explain to her son that he was going to his first professional football match, the one she had been saving for, the one that was supposed to have been his birthday surprise, the one they never made it to. Gabriel did not sleep that night, not because of the pain, for once because of the excitement. The next evening, inside a stadium holding 90,000 people, a boy in a wheelchair sat in row 7 of the East Stand, wearing a jersey with someone else's name on the back. He arrived 40 minutes before kickoff. He watched the players warm up. He watched the stadium fill around him. He watched the lights come on over the pitch, those enormous floodlights that turn an evening match into something that exists outside of ordinary time, something that belongs to a different world entirely. And when Cristiano Ronaldo jogged out of the tunnel and onto the pitch, Gabriel did not cheer the way the crowd around him cheered. He just watched, very still, very quiet. The way you watch something that you cannot quite believe is real. For 67 minutes, the match played out the way football matches do. Action and waiting, noise and silence, moments of beauty separated by long stretches of work. And then Cristiano Ronaldo received the ball just inside the opposing half. He took one touch, he looked up, and across the pitch, through the white glare of the floodlights and the movement of 22 players and the roar of 90,000 voices, his eyes found row 7 of the East Stand. He stopped. The ball rolled ahead of him. The game continued around him for 3 or 4 seconds as players adjusted and repositioned, not yet understanding that the most important thing happening in the stadium at that moment had nothing to do with the ball. Cristiano walked to the sideline. He picked up a spare ball from the ball boy stationed near the corner flag. He walked back to the center of the pitch, set the ball down, and looked toward the East Stand again. Then he raised one hand, not a wave, not a salute, just a hand raised, palm forward in the direction of row 7. A gesture that said, "I see you. I know you are there. This moment is for you." Gabriel raised his hand back. 90,000 people had gone completely silent by then. Not the silence of confusion, but the silence of people who are suddenly aware that they are witnessing something they will never fully be able to describe to anyone who was not there. The referee blew his whistle. The game resumed. Cristiano ran back into his position and played out the remaining 23 minutes with the kind of focused intensity that reminded everyone watching why he had spent his entire career at the top of the sport. He did not score in those 23 minutes. He did not need to. After the final whistle, while his teammates celebrated around him and the crowd began the long process of emptying out of the stadium, Cristiano walked directly to the East Stand. A member of the stadium security team opened the barrier without being asked. Cristiano climbed up to row 7. He kneeled down in front of Gabriel's wheelchair. He said something. Nobody else could hear exactly what it was. Gabriel nodded. Then Gabriel did something that made Diane cover her mouth with both hands and turn away so that nobody would see her face. He laughed. That loud, unself-conscious laugh that had gone somewhere after the accident and that she had not heard in 6 weeks. It came back in row 7 of the East Stand of a football stadium, with 90,000 people filing out around them and the floodlights still burning overhead. Because a man who had spent his entire life learning how to score goals had decided that the most important thing he could do on this particular Wednesday night was to make sure that one boy knew he had been seen. Cristiano took off his match jersey, the one he had worn for the full 90 minutes. He signed it on the spot, right there in the stands, borrowing a marker from a nearby steward, and he placed it in Gabriel's hands. Then he stood up, shook Diane's hand, and said 3 words to her. He is extraordinary. In the weeks and months that followed, people who were in that stadium that night would struggle to explain what made the moment so powerful. It was not the gesture itself, technically speaking. Athletes give jerseys to children all the time. Stars visit hospitals. These things happen. What was different about this was the stopping of the game. The 67-minute mark, the score still hanging in the balance, the tactical situation unresolved, and a man choosing to step out of all of it, not at halftime, not after the whistle, but right in the middle of it, to raise his hand toward a boy in a wheelchair who had come to his first football match 6 weeks later than planned. The choice to stop in a career built entirely on never stopping, on pushing further and harder and longer than any reasonable person would think possible. That was what people remembered. That was what the silence was about. That was what made grown men cry in the stands. Gabriel continued his rehabilitation over the following months. It was slow, the way real recovery always is, nothing like the dramatic turnarounds you see in movies. There were setbacks. There were days that felt impossible. There were nights when Diane sat in the chair beside his bed and held his hand and said nothing because there was nothing to say. But every few weeks, the phone would ring, and it would be Cristiano, like asking about the rehabilitation, asking about the Sunday league team, asking what position Gabriel thought he might play when he got back on a pitch. Always asking that, when, not if, when you get back on a pitch. 14 months after the accident, Gabriel walked onto a grass pitch for the first time. A small training ground, nothing like a professional stadium. Just a rectangle of green with 2 sets of posts at either end and a chain-link fence around the outside. His Sunday league coach was there. His mother was there. A physical therapist who had worked with him twice a week for over a year was there. And Gabriel sent Cristiano a voice message that same evening. He said, "I did it. I thought you should know." Cristiano replied within 4 minutes. He said, "I always knew you would."